Shalom, shalom, peace and blessings. Now let's get straight into it. Today we're going back into Daniel, the 11th chapter, talking about and dealing with concerning Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes, or as he was called, Epiphanes, the madman. So Antiochus the fourth, he is the wicked root. He is the vile person that came up against Israel. And crazy thing is, he didn't even rule that long. The oppression against Israel, relatively speaking, was not that long from a time standpoint, only about 3 years, I believe. But the impact that he had in that amount of time was monumental for our history, because he took part of the abomination of desolation, or taking away of the daily sacrifices. And as many of you probably already know, the high priests in Israel were required to perform daily sacrifices for sin and for other purposes, as far as keeping a covenant for our people under the Levitical priesthood. And we were unable to do that after the sanctuary was defiled. But we're going to get more into that. But that's why he's being mentioned here, and why this was a dark time in our history, because, before Yahushua came on the scene, this was the only way to repent for your sins. All right, so let's go into it. I believe we stopped at verse 21. So let's get it. All right, this is the book of Daniel, chapter 11, verse 21. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. So in his estate shall stand up a vile person. This is referring to none other than Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes. And when it says to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, it's talking about how he came into power. So let's go into the Wikipedia page here. And the Wikipedia page, it gives a quick summary, but we do have the actual resources, and like Polybius histories, and even Josephus, Flavius Josephus, in his Antiquities of the Jews, and many other ancient writers that either lived during this time, or they had the records from people that lived during this time. So everything we see in the book of Daniel, man, it's just remarkable how accurate it is based on history. And speaking of, again, you have to realize when we're reading here in Daniel, the 11th chapter, is accurate down to a T. And this was written around, 550 BC or so. I believe Daniel, on record, he died around 535 BC, and I think this was towards the end of his life. But somewhere around there, that's just the dates that we have. But either way, it was written around that time. You have some scoffers, some so-called Christian scoffers, that try to act like this was written after the fact, but that doesn't really make any sense, seeing that we have the other prophecies, that went on to as well, that pertain to today, that are accurate. So, a lot of people just try to act like the Bible is, just sometimes is right here and there. No, if you understand the Bible, you know that it's either 100% accurate or it's 100% false. There's no in between. People try to pick and choose. But anyways, Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes. And I'm just explaining why we're using Wikipedia, because I've checked all the sources and pretty much everything adds up anyway. So let's go. It says Antiochus, Epiphanes, God manifest, was a Greek Hellenistic king who ruled the Seleucid Empire from 175 BC until his death in 164 BC. So you see, he didn't even reign that long, only 11 years. All right. He was the son of King Antiochus III the Great. So he was also mentioned in several verses in Daniel, the 11th chapter. Originally named Mithridates, he assumed the name Antiochus after he ascended the throne. Notable events during Antiochus' reign include his near conquest of Ptolemaic Egypt. Yeah, he almost conquered Egypt completely. His persecution of the Jews of Judea and Samaria, and the rebellion of the quote-unquote Jewish Maccabees. Now, I think I've said this before. The rebellion of the Maccabees, that's also a vital part of Israel's history. And you never see any of the so-called Jewish people really talking about this. If they did, they would talk about this just as much as the Holocaust and things of that nature, if this was a vital part of the history that they really understood to be connected to them. But I really think deep down, a lot of them cats, they really know it's just a quote unquote religion, a man-made religion. They know they're not really the Israelites of the Bible. I really believe that. You know, and all these wars going on over there right now in so-called Israel, that lets you know too as well that they are not the people of the book, because the scriptures tell us plainly that once Israel is settled in the land, there will be no more wars. Okay. The people will be at peace. So at rest. So, I mean, that lets you know that right there. If the scriptures, if it's not real to you now, you know, I don't know what else to tell you. I'm playing right here before our eyes. Anyways, let's keep going. So this is what the verse, let's go back to the verse here, where it says, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom. Now let's see what that means. It says Antiochus' ascension to the throne was controversial. You see, and he was seen as a usurper by some. After the death of his brother Seleucus IV, Philopator, in 175 BC, the true, quote unquote, true heir should have been Seleucus' son, Demetrius I. So that's what it means there. So Demetrius I was really supposed to be the next person up to rule the Seleucid Empire. And that's why he wasn't given honor of the kingdom. Okay, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Okay, let's see what that means. I want to skip down here to rise to power. Okay, it says Seleucus died in September 175 BC. Ancient sources say he was assassinated by the government minister Heliodorus. Yeah, he probably was, more than likely. Heliodorus proclaimed himself regent afterward. So he was trying to be the king, Heliodorus. We talked about him last part. Essentially giving himself control of the government. This arrangement did not last long. With the help of King Eumenes II of Pergamum, Antiochus IV traveled from Athens through Asia Minor and reached Syria by November 175 BC. Seleucus' legitimate heir, Demetrius I Soter, was still hostage in Rome, so Antiochus seized the throne for himself, proclaiming himself co-regent with another son of Seleucus, an infant named Antiochus. Antiochus, son of Seleucus IV, would later die in 170 BC, possibly murdered by Antiochus IV. So, yeah, he probably did. He probably killed his own nephew. Because as we were about to see, he has no problem with, oppressing his nephews. He probably did do this. But what it's getting at here in this first verse that we're going over here in verse 21, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flattery. So he didn't first of all, he wasn't even a rightful heir. Antiochus IV wasn't. Okay, he didn't obtain the kingdom by war or anything like that. So he came in peaceably and he obtained the kingdom by flatteries because he just came in and claimed to be co-regent. So, and he also got the help of King Eumenes II. So that's what it means by flatteries. He wasn't even supposed to be there. All right. He just forced his way into kingdomship. All right. So let's get the next verse. It says, verse 22, and with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken. Yea, also the prince of the covenant. So with the arms of a flood, you'll see this used a lot in scripture. The arms of a flood being, arms of a flood being likened into an army. All right, this shall be overflown from before him, referring to the Egyptians or the Ptolemies at that time, and also Israel too as well. So the arms of the flood, the armies, shall be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. Now let's pull up our sheet here. So where it says, let's go to verse 22. We have here in the first war against Egypt, well, let's go back up here, referring to Antiochus IV's military invasions of Egypt during his reign. He invaded Egypt 4 different times during his reign. So, the arms of the flood shall be overflown from before him, and shall be broken. In the first war against Egypt, Ptolemy Philometor, which we're going to read about him, or we're going to talk about him in just a second, was advised by Julius and Linnaeus to take Syria, and Israel is within this territory. Okay, Antiochus was given warning and attacked Egypt successfully first. The Seleucids conquered all of Egypt outside of Alexandria. So that's why I said earlier the near conquest of Egypt, because Antiochus IV almost completely took over Egypt, but he wasn't able to capture Alexandria. So the prince of the covenant is Onias III, the high priest that was killed by Andronicus. So let's get that 2 Maccabees chapter 4. Let's get that. The prince of the covenant, which was broken or killed. All right, so Menelaus, he was actually an Israelite. He's one of the wicked ones that went against his own nation. So Menelaus, that's actually a Greek name. That wasn't his original name. But let's get verse 34. Wherefore Menelaus, taking Andronicus apart, prayed him to get Onias into his hands, who being persuaded thereunto, and coming to Onias in deceit, gave him his right hand with oaths. And though he were suspected by him, yet persuaded he him to come forth of the sanctuary, whom forthwith he shut up without regard of justice. So he murdered him. All right, Andronicus murdered Onias, which is, he was a righteous high priest, because you had like Jason, he was going off too. He was a high priest that worked hand in hand with Antiochus IV. Okay, so we're going to go into that in just a second too. You had many men of Israel that went into leagues with the other nations, or more specifically with the Greeks at this time with Antiochus IV. Okay, so when you see that happen today, you shouldn't be shocked. You know, when you see our people, quote unquote, selling out, you really shouldn't be shocked. You know, I reference this event a lot because it really it showed me a lot about how our people think. And honestly, even most of the people that's in the knowledge has shown me about how they think too as well. But and I think I've used this reference before, but when the Kyrie Irving and Kanye West situation was going down last year, you had, you know, so many so-called celebrities like Shaq and who else? It was a lot of them. I can't remember right now, but you know, I know for sure Shaq and other celebrities like that, or former athletes or whatever the case, they were talking down on Kyrie and Kanye. And you know, when you see things like that, you just shouldn't be shocked. And I wasn't with all the Kyrie and Kanye stuff. I was telling brothers that was a sham from the beginning, but they weren't trying to listen. But anyways, when you see stuff like that, man, you shouldn't be shocked, because our people, man, we have been in league with the heathen ever since the beginning, man. That's just what we gonna do. So you should not, just because somebody is so-called black and they on TV, you should not expect them to, you know, have their own people back. It really doesn't make sense. That's just not how it works in this captivity. This is not a righteous nation. So that's not that's not something you should be expecting. Anyways, verse 35. For the which cause not only the Jews, but many also of the other nations took great indignation and were much grieved for the unjust murder of the man. So Onias, which is broken, okay, the prince of the covenant. All right. Verse 23. And we could go more into it, but for the sake of time, I want to cover everything in there because, man, we'll be here all day. We're going to try to cover more of the Maccabees as we go through this chapter, though. When I say this chapter, Daniel chapter 11, because it's an intense part of our history that really needs to be covered. All right, verse 23. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. Okay, so this is referring to Antiochus the fourth making a league with Jason. Let's read about that. Let's get it. 2 Maccabees chapter 4, verses 5, I believe. Let's get that. So in the same chapter, let's go back up here. So it says here, let's start at the top. 2 Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 1. This Simon now, of whom we spake before, having been a bewarer of the money and of his country, slandered Onias as if he had terrified Heliodorus and been the worker of these evils. Verse 2, thus he was bold to call him a traitor, that he had deserved well of the city and tendered his own nation, and was so zealous of the laws. Verse 3, but when their hatred went so far that by one of Simon's faction murders were committed. Verse 4, Onias, seeing the danger of this contention, and that Apollonius, as being the governor of Cilicia and Phoenix, did rage and increase Simon's malice. Okay, here we go. We get to the point now, verse 5. He went to the king, not to be an accuser of his countrymen, but seeking the good of all, both public and private. For he saw, verse 6, that it was impossible that the state should continue quiet and Simon leave his folly, unless the king did look thereunto. But after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus called Epiphanes took the kingdom, Jason, a brother of Onias, labored under hand to be high priest, promising unto the king by intercession 360 talents of silver, and of another revenue 80 talents. Okay, you see what's happening here? Verse 9. Besides this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set him up a place for exercise, and for the training up of youth in the fashions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochus. So Jason, the high priest, is making a wicked league with Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes. Okay, for the promise of riches. All right, he promised it to the king by intercession 360 talents of silver. Okay, you see? So he's being corrupted. All right, because he's supposed to be a high priest. Now, the high priest at this time, they supposed to be some of the more righteous of our people, because they had to handle the altar and the sanctuary, in the rites of the law. So, nobody's supposed to be going off, but they ain't sure not the high priest. So, this is wicked all over. All right. It was kind of like, say if we had our own nation and we had a king, or like King David, just, selling out to Philistines or something. That's kind of equivalent what's happening here. So, of course, we weren't in rulership at this time or nothing like that, but you get the point. So that's what's going on here. And that's what the scriptures were referring to. So when it says, and after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully. So that's Antiochus working deceitfully after the league made with Jason, the high priest. For he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. They are the Antiochians. Okay. And to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochians. Verse 10. Which when the king had granted and he had gotten into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to the Greekish fashion. So this is when, I won't say when, but this is, this is when you saw more of our people blending in with the heathens or the Greekish fashions or the Greeks in general. You see? So we are foregoing our own laws, or we're foregoing our own commandments. The fashions that we were supposed to wear according to the covenant, and we ditching that for, probably a toga or something, some wicked that we not supposed to be wearing. And man, these cats known for being naked, so ain't no telling. Sisters out there probably dressing worse than what we are, and brothers probably out there with the meat out and stuff. That's the way of the Greeks, man. So that's the deception, and that's the league that was made. All right, with Antiochus the fourth. All right. Again, vital times in our history, man. If you're not familiar with the Maccabees, okay, you haven't read First and Second Maccabees, I highly recommend it. Okay, but let's go into it. Verse 24. He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil and riches, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. All right. So what we saw out of Antiochus the fourth is he liked to go around. He was a king now, but he liked to go around the common people and go and get drunk and go and bathe at the bathhouses with the normies, so to say. Let's get it here. It says ruling style. Antiochus the fourth cultivated a reputation as an extravagant and generous ruler. So he was seen as an extravagant and generous ruler, but he had a reason for doing that. He was trying to get the people on his side, so he wasn't just being generous just because. Okay, it says he scattered money to common people in the streets of Antioch, gave unexpected gifts to people he did not know, contributed money to the temple of Zeus at Athens at the altar of Delos, put all his Western military forces on a massive parade at Daphne, a suburb of Antioch, and held opulent banquets with the aristocracy, using the best spices, clothing, and food. He also supplemented the Seleucid army with mercenaries. All of this cost the Seleucid treasury, but the empire was apparently able to raise enough taxes to pay for it. Remember, his brother Seleucus IV, that's all he did during his reign is collect taxes, because his father Antiochus III, he lost that battle against Rome and they owed them a lot of money. But either way, that's what this is going into. Okay, so he shall enter peaceably upon the fattest places of the province in Antioch. Okay, he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches. So that's what we were just reading about. You see? So his fathers and fathers' fathers never even did this. And scriptures tell us that in 2 Maccabees chapter 3, I believe. 1 Maccabees chapter 3, excuse me. Let's get it. 1 Maccabees chapter 3 and around verse 30. it says, verse 29, nevertheless, when he saw that the money of his treasures failed, and that the tributes in the country were small, because of the dissension and plague which he had brought upon the land, and taken away the laws which had been of old time. See, we just read about that too. Verse 30, he feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did before. And he had abounded above the kings that were before him, or his father's fathers. Okay. So he was just giving out money to everyone, in Antioch, in his kingdom. But again, he was doing that so that when he went to war, the people would have his back. Okay. He wasn't doing that just because he was a good person. He did too much for us to believe that. Yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. Okay. Yeah, I think we got that there. All right, let's get verse 25 then. Verse 25, and he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. So when you read the king of the south here in Daniel chapter 11, but also in the other chapters in Daniel, you should automatically know that it's referring to the Ptolemies. Okay. So the king of the south at this time is Ptolemy Philometor. Okay. So he shall stir up his power and courage against the king of the south with a great army. We can read about that in 1 Maccabees chapter 1. Okay. So, matter of fact, 1 Maccabees chapter 1, it really covers a lot of the different verses in Daniel chapter 11. That's what I really like about 1st and 2nd Maccabees. They line up so well with Daniel chapter 11. But let's go to verse 10 here, and we've read this before, but let's get it again. 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, that's Antiochus III, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Verse 11, in those days when there out of Israel wicked men, we were reading about that, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. Me and a brother were just speaking last night. He was saying how, and we were both noting how anytime you tell any of our people, that they are the Israelites of the Bible and they're above all nations, the first thing they're going to ask is, what about the white man? They'll ask about the so-called Arabs. They'll ask about the Chinaman. They don't ask about, anybody else for the most part. First thing they're going to ask is, what about the so-called white man? Okay, again, it shouldn't surprise you, though. It shouldn't be anything that, confounds you when you see it. I mean, it really depends, I guess, depending on how long that you've been in this walk. But for me, it's coming up on 5 years for me. So it's not anything that shocks me. And then when we read this, let's go and make a covenant with the heathen. We see that our people been doing this, man. We've been making covenants with the heathen. This was over 2,000 years ago. Okay, we've been doing this in our spirit to do that, at least on some of our people's spirit. Okay, some of us got a Maccabean revolt type of spirit, and it doesn't even have to be physical, like we were going out like Judas Maccabeus and and bringing that hammer to them, but meaning from a standpoint, you just not willing to conform with this society. And some of our people have the spirit of these wicked men here. It is what it is. So don't be confounded when you see it. But verse 12, so this device pleased them well. Hey, you know how Jake is. They be pleased being with a so-called white man. And look, when I say that, man, I'm not talking about them individually. I'm not talking about your neighbor and your coworkers and all of that. That is what it is. You may have personal relationships with people of other nations. I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to on the highest level, meaning conforming to this society and not wanting to accept that you are above all nations pursuant to scripture because you want to blend in and meld in with the other nations. That's what I'm more speaking of, not on an individual basis. Verse 13, then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinance of the heathen. Okay. So let's go back here. I'll go into the battle. So let's go to that. Verse 16. We're going to skip that because we're going to get the rest of those verses here soon. Let's get verse 16. Now, when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have dominion of 2 realms. Wherefore he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots and elephants and horsemen and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt, the king of the south. Okay, but Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Okay, this Ptolemy here is Ptolemy Philometor. All right, that's the king of the south. And you see, with a great army, we just read that, with the chariots and the horsemen and the elephants. Okay, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand. They lost his war. Okay, so we can read about that here. Again, we have many sources. I was going to go into a lot of sources and kind of read exactly where I'm pulling everything from, but it just makes the lesson 2 times longer. So instead, I'm just going to share everything here in this document. As you see, I have historical sources, direct information, the scriptures. I'm just going to share this with brothers and sisters once this lesson is wrapped up. I'm just trying to cover the bases here. What else do we have here? The king of the south shall be stirred about. Yep, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Now, what does that mean when it says they shall forecast devices against him? It says Antiochus used Ptolemy's general, Ptolemy Macron, surrendered and betrayed Ptolemy by joining Antiochus, which helped to win the 6th Syrian War. So basically what I'm saying here is that when it says, for they shall forecast devices against him, so Ptolemy Philometor, he actually had a general that betrayed him. He joined Antiochus and really helped him win this war. Okay, because Antiochus, he was warned, like really, the Ptolemies, they actually were about to go to war with and catch Antiochus IV slipping. But Antiochus IV, he caught wind of it. He was, oh no. And he went and attacked first. But he had a general that pretty much betrayed him. Let's pull up Ptolemy Macron. Okay, it says here, Ptolemy Macron was a Greek official in the Hellenistic era. He first served the Ptolemaic kingdom as governor of the island Cyprus. During the 6th Syrian War between the Seleucid Empire under King Antiochus IV Epiphanes and the Ptolemaic kingdom under King Ptolemy VI Philometor, he surrendered Cyprus to an invading Seleucid fleet, betraying the Ptolemies and joining the Seleucid Empire. Those are the devices right here that were forecast against him. See, because he was guided in war by the other side. All right. We can go into more, but I'm gonna keep it as brief as possible on that for now. Verse 26, yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. So it says, yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him. So what is this reference to? They that feed of the portion of his meat is Ptolemy Philometor's own generals and councils that betray him. You see? When it says his army shall overflow, Antiochus' army took over Egypt's army. Many shall fall down slain. The loss was great on the Ptolemy side, as we just read in 1 Maccabees chapter 1 here. And many were wounded to death. Okay? All right, that's what it means by many will fall down slain. And I had some scriptures here to go over that we can get that talks about the arms of the flood. However, again, it just makes the lesson much longer. So I'm going to put the scriptures up here, or you guys can see it on screen right now, actually, and you can go to it on your own time too as well. All right, verse 27. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper. For yet the end shall be at the time appointed. So both these kings is referring to the king of the north and the king of the south, Antiochus the fourth. And by the way, Ptolemy the sixth, Philometor, that's actually Antiochus the fourth's nephew via Cleopatra the first, which is his sister. That's his sister's son. So he going to war with his own nephew. All right, this dude. That's why I said that it wouldn't surprise me if he killed his other nephew by his brother Seleucus IV, because he has no problem, in destroying his own family. Look like to me. But both these kings' heart shall be to do mischief. Let's get that. So Ptolemy and Antiochus both spoke lies and had to each other and had separate agendas. Once Antiochus captured Ptolemy, both of their plans did not prosper. So Antiochus IV, he actually captured Ptolemy, as we saw here. He fled, but he captured him. And when he captured him, they they met up. They had, dinner together, because Antiochus IV, he was kind of playing a role like he was, at peace, but really in his heart, he wanted to take over all of Egypt, as we read in the scriptures there. And Ptolemy Philometor, he also had his own agenda too as well for talking to Antiochus IV. Okay, because he was trying to make sure his brother, which is Ptolemy Physcon, making sure that Physcon, which was his younger brother, Ptolemy Philometor. I know it's a lot of names, but y'all bear with me. But he was trying to make sure that his younger brother wasn't going to take over Egypt. But either way, that's all it's referring to here. But it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. So their lies that they spoke at the table with each other did not prosper. Okay, verse 28. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land. So let's break it down. Then shall he return into his land with great riches. So after the war in Egypt, Antiochus IV took many spoils. Okay, many riches. Let's get the scripture on that. Let's see, 1 Maccabees chapter 1 and 19. All right, it says, thus they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof. That's where the riches come from. Okay, shall return into his land with great riches. And it says, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant. So this is where we start to see where Antiochus IV is starting to oppress the people of Israel. Okay, now his heart is going to be against the Holy Covenant, because what happened was, we'll see what had happened was now. So while Antiochus IV was at war in Egypt, almost taking over that place, there was a rumor that Antiochus IV was dead, which caused, it caused the people of Israel to revolt to try to get up out that thing under the oppression of the Greeks. But he wasn't dead. But when he came back and he found out, that there was a revolt, he was pissed. Okay. So let's get the scriptures on that, because it says that pretty plainly here in 2 Maccabees chapter 5, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, let's go up here. 2 Maccabees chapter 5, verse 5. Zoom in a bit more. Now, when there was gone forth a false rumor, as though Antiochus had been dead, Jason took at the least 1,000 men and suddenly made an assault upon the city. And they that were upon the walls being put back, and the city at length taken, Menelaus fled into the castle. Like, this dude fled, man, coward. Again, remember, he was an Israelite, and he fled because he knew it was about to go down. So Antiochus did not die, at least at this time. And Jason, which is also an Israelite, look, he took at least 1,000 men and suddenly made assault upon the city. So, he slaying his own people. Verse 6, but Jason slew his own citizens without mercy, not considering that to get to the day of them of his own nation would be a most unhappy day for him, but thinking they had been his enemies and not his countrymen whom he conquered, because his allegiance was to Antiochus IV. So he viewed his own people as enemies. All right, so this is a house nigga here, basically. And he said, y'all ain't gonna do this to Massa. All right. So that's what's going on here. And that's what caused Antiochus IV to, start destroying the Israelites. All right. And he shall do exploits and return to his own land. All right. So the exploits are really, some of what we were reading about earlier, how Antiochus IV was making sure Israel was instructed in the ways of the heathen. Okay. So I believe that's all I'm going to get. Let's get a little bit more. Verse 15, yet was he not content with this, he presumed to go into the most holy temple of all the world. Menelaus, that traitor to the laws and to his own country, being his guide. Verse 16, and taking the holy vessels with polluted hands and with profane hands. Only the high priest and the Levitical priests are supposed to be in the temple, man. So anybody else, that's polluted hands. All right, with profane hands, pulling down the things that were dedicated by other kings, to the augmentation and glory and honor of the place, he gave them away. Verse 17, and so haughty was Antiochus in mind, that he considered not that the Lord was angry for a while for the sins of them that dwelt in the city, and therefore his eye was not upon the place. So this is saying the Most High allowed this to happen because of the sins of the people of Israel. Anytime another nation rules over Israel, it's because of our own sins. Point blank, period. All right, and that's what it's saying here. But these are the exploits of Antiochus IV. And this is just the beginning of it. Okay, defiling the temple with polluted hands, pulling down the things that were dedicated by the other kings, taking away the honor and the glory of the place. All right. And then Menelaus, which is an Israelite, being a traitor to the laws. These are the devices, and the exploits of Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, the madman. All right. As he was called in Antioch. All right, verse 29. At the time appointed, he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. So Antiochus the fourth, remember, he invaded Egypt 4 different times, 3 or 4 different times, man. So this is a time where he went back. He went back into Egypt because there was a civil uproar and who was going to be the king between Antiochus, not Antiochus, out of Ptolemy Philometor and his younger brother. Okay. So there was an uproar. Antiochus saw an opening and he wanted to go back in because remember, he wanted to conquer Egypt completely. So when it says at the time appointed, he shall return into Egypt, Antiochus the fourth, and come towards the south. Yeah, the south is Egypt, south of Jerusalem at least. But it shall not be as the former or as the latter. Okay. Why is that? Because when he returned for that third time, he found out that, not that he found out, the first and latter attack by Antiochus IV on Egypt was successful, but the third was not. So his third time going in was not successful like the first and second time. That's why it says, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. Okay. Verse 30, for the ships of Kittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. So for the ships of Kittim shall come against him. Who are the ships of Kittim? The ships of Kittim is Rome. All right. So again, remember, this is just like in Revelation chapter 20 when you see Kittim. Kittim is really in a Japhetic nation. Let's go here. But it's used to describe either Rome or the Greeks at times because those are the people that took over those Japhetic lands. Okay. Like in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. That's why we see Japhetic names being used, but it's really referring to either the Greeks or the Romans. Or the Romans. Kittim or Kittim, bruisers, excuse me, y'all. A general term for all the islanders of the Mediterranean Sea, the descendants of Javan, the son of Japhet, and a grandson of Noah. Okay. But it says here, Strong's definitions, patriarch from the unused name, denoting Cyprus, a Kittite or Cypriot, hence an islander in general, i.e. it says the Greeks are Romans on the shores opposite Palestine. Chittim or Kittim. Okay. Again, this is referring to the Greeks or the Romans. But now this is referring to the Romans where it says the ships of Kittim, okay, shall come against them because they did. We're about to read about how here in just a second. Okay, it says Ptolemy Philometor and his brother Ptolemy Euergetes requested for help from Rome from the conquest of Antiochus IV. So when he went back in this time, both of the brothers, they were like, yo, they reached out to Rome for help. They had already reached out to Rome for help the first time that he went in, he being Antiochus IV, but Rome was occupied with the Macedonian War at that time, so they couldn't help them. All right, so Rome was like this overseer at this time. They were, they were gaining power because remember, Rome is the next rulership. Okay, so right now it's the Greeks is getting towards the end of the Greeks and the Romans. And the Romans are about to take over. All right, when I say take over, meaning being a rulership, specifically over the land of Israel. But Gaius Popilius Laenus, made Antiochus IV withdraw his troops from Alexandria, Egypt. Okay, So when they reached out, Rome came out, and Antiochus IV, he wanted to keep, he wanted to keep a good rapport with Rome. So we got the whole story here. Brothers and sisters can read that on their own, but essentially what happened, this dude, like I said, he came out to deliver a message from Rome to withdraw his armies from Egypt and Cyprus. Okay. And Antiochus IV, he didn't want to do it. He was like, let me think about it for a second. But he actually drew a line in the sand around Antiochus and said, before you leave this circle, give me a reply that I can take back to the Roman Senate. This implied Rome would declare war if the king stepped out the circle without committing to leave Egypt immediately. Weighing his options, Antiochus IV decided to withdraw. Only then did Popilius agree to shake hands with them. So I saw that in several sources, so I believe that to be true, that happened. This dude actually drew that circle. So-called black people draw that line. If you bad cross this line, that's what he did. He drew a circle around him and said, all right, you step out and you don't leave these boys alone, hey, we gonna declare war. And he didn't want that. For whatever reason, Antiochus IV, he didn't want no smoke with Rome. He wanted to keep a good rapport with them. So it was successful for the Ptolemies reaching out to Rome because they stopped the war at that time. So he withdrew from Egypt. Okay. And that's why, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. When he went into Egypt, he being Antiochus IV. So that's what it means there. But now, therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. So once he got back, he began to oppress Israel. All right. Have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. That's the wicked men in Israel that was pleased with betraying their people. Okay. So, another thing, when you see the ships of Kittim, let's go to Numbers chapter 24. Let's get this prophecy. Okay. Let's get this prophecy. Let's start at verse 15. And he took up his parable and said, Balaam, the son of Beor, hath said, and the man whose eyes are open hath said. He hath said, which heard the words of the Most High, and knew the knowledge of the Most High, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open. Verse 17, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob. Who is that star out of Jacob? Old Testament only brothers seem to act like we just be pulling a Christ out of nowhere, like the scriptures don't allude to him. Anyways, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of Sheth. Okay, that's not referring to any of the kings that ever lived, and any king that's ever going to live here in this time, because we're not even in rulership for that to be the case. Nobody finna smite Moab right now, or the children of Sheth. But anyways, verse 18, Edom shall be a possession. Seir also shall be a possession for his enemies, and Israel shall do violently. All right. Verse 19, out of Jacob shall come he that shall have dominion, and shall destroy him that remaineth of the city. All right. Out of Jacob shall come he that shall have dominion. This is Yahushua, Psalm chapter 2, Revelation chapter 19. All over the scriptures, and shall destroy him that remaineth of the city. Verse 20, and when he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. Obadiah, verse 18. Okay, Amalek is the so-called Jewish people of today. Okay, but his end shall be that he perish forever. Those are the people, at least on the high, at the very top, the so-called elites that are really running the show. Okay. Verse 21, and he looked on the Kenites and took up his parable and said, strong is thy dwelling place, and thou puttest thy nest in a rock. Nevertheless, the Kenites shall be wasted until Ashur shall carry thee away captive. Just saying how all the other nations are going to be subjected under the Israelites, being led by the Savior Yahushua, okay, the Christ, the anointed one. All right, verse 23, and he took up his parable and said, alas, who shall live when the Most High doeth this? See what it says here, verse 24, and ships shall come from the coasts of Kittim. All right, and shall afflict Ashur, and shall afflict Eber. Remember, Eber is what, 7 generations down from Abraham. Eber is where we get Hebrew from. All right, and he also shall perish forever. Okay. The ships that shall come from Kittim. So also in the book of Daniel, once we get past, I want to say verse 35, 36 on down, I've stated before that this is all about Antiochus IV. That's only half true. I should have mentioned this earlier, but what we see from here down is actually an allusion to the end times, with the biblical scholars called the Antichrist, but there is no one Antichrist. There isn't just one person. Anyone that's against the scriptures is an Antichrist, but there is not one Antichrist, unless you want to call Satan himself an Antichrist. But Satan works through men, and other objects too as well. But that's the only person that could be an individual and soul Antichrist. But other than that, I mean, it's going to be, a conglomerate of the nations and those of the so-called elite that are going to come down the most. At least that's going to lead that revolution of coming down on the saints the most. But there is not just one Antichrist. So verses 36 on down, we actually see that it can apply to Antiochus IV, but really it's referring to the last king, this Roman rulership that we under right now, this Babylonian empire, and how they're going to be taken out of power. Okay, and the idolatry thereof. Let's get some scriptures, and then we'll close out from there and start at verse 31. I wanted to get to that, but let's pull some scriptures, and then we'll close out, and then we'll come back and wrap it up in the next installment. So first Maccabees chapter 1 and verse chapter 8, verse 5. Okay. So you see verse 5, besides this, how they had discomfited in battle Philip and Perseus, kings of the Kittims, with others that fit up themselves against them and had overcome them. Oh, and remember when it says the ships of Kittim, remember what it said about Alexander here in verse 1 in first Maccabees chapter 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. Okay, because the Macedonians, they took over that land. All right. So that's where it says the ships of Kittim. It's not referring to the Japhetic nation of Kittim. It's referring to the Greeks and the Romans. Okay. For the ships of Kittim shall come against him. But really there it's talking about the Romans that came against him. Therefore, he shall be grieved. So when he couldn't take over Egypt completely, he was grieved. And return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. Yeah, let's get some scriptures for verse 30, and then we'll close out from there. Let's get Daniel chapter 8. That's something else I wanted to mention, is that Antiochus IV was also mentioned here. So let's get Daniel chapter 8 and verse 10. And it waxed great even to the hosts of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and the stars of the ground and stamped upon them. Matter of fact, let's get verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land, Israel or Jerusalem. Okay, this is referring to none other than Antiochus IV Epiphanes, or as was called Epiphanes, the madman. All right, so he's that little horn here that's being mentioned in Daniel chapter 8 and verse 9. All right, verse 10. And it waxed great even to the hosts of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. So this is really the same thing that we've been reading about. When it says the host of heaven, it says cast down some of the hosts and of the stars, meaning the high priest of Israel and some of the stars to the ground, some of the Israelites. Okay. They were destroyed, all right, killed, slaughtered, taken into slavery even. Okay, we'll read about more of that too. All right. Because we are the hosts of heaven, and cast down some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Okay, the saints, the children of the Most High. Verse 11, yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the hosts, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. See? So he magnified himself to the prince of the hosts. All right. And by him, the daily sacrifice was taken away. Again, we're going to get more into the daily sacrifice being taken away next time. Let's get 2 Maccabees chapter 5 and verse 24. 2 Maccabees chapter 5 and verse 24. He sent also that detestable ringleader Apollonius with an army of 22,000, commanding him to slay all those that were in their best age, and to sell the women and the younger sword, who coming to Jerusalem and pretending peace, did forbear till the holy day of the Sabbath, when taking the Jews keeping holy day, he commanded his men to arm themselves. Sometimes brothers ask, how do we know that the day we call Saturday is the Sabbath of the scriptures? Well, we have records of these wars where a lot of the nations, they knew that Israel kept the Sabbath, and on the seventh day they would rest. So if you would go against them on the seventh day, they wouldn't attack back. The other nations knew that. The Greeks knew that. The Romans knew that. They both employed this. So, and in the writing, in the ancient writings, we see it would say the day of Saturn. All right, the day of Saturn, and that's where we get Saturday from. All right, from the Roman god Saturn. Okay, so if you're wondering, how we know that, that's one thing here. I just wanted to note quickly, but as you see, the Greeks, they slaughtering and selling the Israelites as slaves, selling the women, so it says who come into Jerusalem and pretending peace. So they were pretending peace. Did forbear to the holy day of the Sabbath, when taking the Jews keeping holy day, he commanded his men to arm themselves, because he knew that they were at rest and they wouldn't fight back. Okay. But those of the Maccabean revolt, they said, man, we just going to have to fight even on the Shabbat. All right, but anyways, verse 26. And so he slew all them that were gone to the celebrating of the Sabbath, and running through the city with weapons, slew great multitudes. Okay. So this is the indignation against the Holy Covenant. The law is the Holy Covenant. This word is the Holy Covenant with the children of Israel, the first and second covenant, which all belongs only to Israel. Okay. So shall he do, he shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. So remember Jason, it called him a traitor even here in the book of Maccabees. All right. Second Maccabees chapter 5 and verse, I know Second Maccabees chapter 5, but as you see, verse 6. So as you see, that's who the intelligence was, Menelaus and Jason, who were going against the covenant. All right. And then also we could get First Maccabees chapter 1 and 11, and we'll wrap up here. We'll get this again. Okay, First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 11 again. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen. This is the intelligence. Those that forsake the covenant that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. Let's skip down to verse 40. Okay. As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency was turned into mourning. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all shall be one people, just like here in so-called America. Okay, they're trying to make sure everybody is a one people. All right, you're all an American, African American, Asian American. You're all just American. You're one people. Okay, everybody got to do the same thing. And if you don't, you're going to be seen as a weirdo, an outsider. Like with the COVID vaccines, you're a grandmama killer. You got to all be as a one people, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right, one people. Verse 42, and everyone should have, and everyone should leave his laws. You see? That's the motto of today. Leave your laws. We're all the same people. There's only one race, the human race. That's the same doctrine as Antiochus IV had. All other nations, man, all nations, they supposed to be keeping, their own rights and rituals and things. Like, people really shouldn't get mad when they see the other nations, like the so-called Indians worshiping Shiva and things. Like, just let them do what they do. That's their own laws. And yes, idol gods. And how was I going to see about all that when he come here? But, let them be. That's what they supposed to be doing anyways. The gods of the nations are idols. But anyways, verse 42, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Verse 43, yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath, just like today. Okay. We've consented into this religion, Christianity, Islam, wherever, in between. We've consented into that religion, and we sacrifice into idols. We profane the Sabbath because most of our people don't even keep it. Verse 44, for the king has sent letters by messengers into Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land. See, the strange laws of the land, just like this place. Address somebody by their pronoun. All right. That's a strange law of the land. Verse 45, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice, a daily sacrifice taken away, and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, or the feast days. Verse 46, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves, that's what they do today, and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts. All right. Like alligator and stuff that they be having folks eat here. And people around my way, some brothers from like the, from the north and everything may not even heard this, but from around my way, man, our people used to eat raccoon and different things like that. These are unclean beasts. All right, sacrifice swine's flesh. All right, that's what the American breakfast includes bacon. It's hard pressed that you go anywhere where, swine's flesh isn't being offered. All right, as you see, this is a Greco-Roman way to live. So we live in a society modeled behind heathen customs. And though you do not see it outright in Antiochus IV Epiphanes slaughtering our people, you don't see it directly stated that way, but that's exactly what's happening. This is history repeating itself in this world today. It's the exact same thing. When you read 1 Maccabees chapter 1, you don't come to realize that's exactly what situation that we're in. That's the condition of the battle that we're in today as a people. Okay. Verse 48, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change all ordinances. Okay. So that's exactly what we've done. We forgot the law. All right. And lastly, verse 50, and whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. Right now, a lot of times they don't say that directly, but that's what it's coming down to. That's what it's going to come down to. They're going to take it to the next level. Like again, with the COVID vaccine, they were trying to clearly divide the line between the people that will blindly follow exactly what they told to do, even if it doesn't make sense, and then the people that's going to think for themselves. But it's going to get even clearer when the whole world finds out who the children of Israel are. All right. And, if our people, we don't do exactly, what's instructed, we'll be put to death too. That's pursuing the scripture, not just my own words, but that's pretty much it on this part. Lord willing, it was edifying. Until next time, I bid everyone a mighty shalom.